couldn't stay away. Not from you. Not anymore.
You're really here. I thought I had lost you forever.
He sat in his corner office, staring out at the skyline, but seeing nothing. The city buzzed below with life, but up here everything felt sterile and cold. Meetings came and went like waves, and every handshake felt rehearsed, every smile forced. At night, he would scroll through his phone, searching for something, anything, that didn't feel empty. This wasn't just another emotional story of corporate burnout. It was a silent scream trapped behind designer suits and million-dollar deals. Every morning started the same way. Black coffee, a packed schedule, and a growing sense of detachment. His assistants catered to his every need, but none of them truly knew him. The more success he gained, the lonelier he became. There were nights he wondered if anyone would notice if he disappeared for a while. Even surrounded by people, he felt like the loneliest man in the room, a walking contradiction with everything money could buy, except peace. The boardroom was his battlefield, and he played the game well. Ruthless when needed, charming when it counted. Investors loved him, competitors feared him. But behind closed doors, he was just another soul craving connection. The city lights outside his window glittered like diamonds, but none of them could fill the growing void inside him. This touching story was about more than business strategies. It was about a man quietly breaking on the inside. Late at night, he would sit by the floor-to-ceiling glass, swirling whiskey in a crystal glass, asking himself questions he didn't have the courage to answer. Was this all life had to offer? Was this relentless chase for power and status worth the emotional toll? Sometimes he found himself longing for simpler times, back when happiness wasn't measured in quarterly earnings. It was a real story of success without fulfillment, fame without friendship. His phone was always buzzing. Calls from shareholders, messages from business partners, invitations to elite events he had no interest in attending. Even relationships felt transactional now. Dates arranged by PR teams, women more interested in his bank account than his heart. The pressure to maintain his image was suffocating. Every smile in public became another mask he had to wear, and each day it got harder to take it off. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. Night after night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, deals, and decisions. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who could buy islands couldn't purchase a good night's sleep. His health was beginning to suffer, and deep down, he knew something had to change. But where would he even start? How do you escape from a golden cage you built with your own hands? And so, on one particular morning, after yet another sleepless night and a board meeting that left him emotionally drained, he made a decision. A spontaneous, unplanned, completely out-of-character decision. He needed to get away, far away. Somewhere no one knew his name, somewhere he could breathe again. Little did he know. That small decision was about to set the stage for something that would change his life forever. Without warning, he cancelled all his meetings, silenced his phone, and instructed his driver to head toward the nearest airport. His staff panicked. This wasn't like him. For years, every minute of his life had been scheduled and controlled. But in that moment, he didn't care. He needed air, space, and most of all, silence. The jet sat on the tarmac, engines humming softly, waiting for instructions. Instead of heading to some luxury resort or exclusive retreat, he picked a random small town on the map, one he couldn't even pronounce. The flight crew exchanged confused glances, but complied without question. As the plane lifted off, he leaned back, closing his eyes, wondering if this impulsive act would bring relief or just more regret. Somewhere deep inside, he hoped for something different. Hours later, when he stepped off the plane, the change hit him like a gust of unfamiliar air. No paparazzi, no waiting car service with his name on a placard. Just the faint smell of grass after rain and the quiet hum of crickets in the distance. The streets were lined with small shops, families walking hand in hand, and kids riding their bikes without a care in the world. It was the kind of scene he hadn't witnessed since childhood. The first night at the local inn was strange. The bed was smaller, the sheets smelled of lavender, and the old ceiling fan creaked with every turn. There was no room service, no concierge, just a handwritten welcome note and a home-cooked breakfast promised for the morning. He laughed quietly to himself, realizing how far he'd drifted from simple pleasures. It felt odd, but oddly comforting. Walking down Main Street the next morning, he attracted a few curious stares. Not because he was famous, but because he was new. People smiled at him for no reason, waved as they passed, and struck up conversations as if they'd known him for years. At first, it made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to this level of human interaction without an agenda behind it. But something about their sincerity made him lower his guard, just a little. Days passed, and he began to notice small details. The way the bakery smelled at sunrise, the old man reading the newspaper on the same bench every day, the kids running through sprinklers in front yards. The slower pace forced him to pause, to observe, to feel. It was a strange kind of therapy, one that didn't come with a hefty price tag or require a booking through his assistant. This wasn't just another touching story of a man on vacation. It was a quiet unraveling of walls he didn't even know he'd built, and just when he thought the town had shown him all its surprises, fate introduced him to her. A brief, accidental encounter that would soon rewrite everything he believed about life, happiness, and love. Little did he know, the next chapter of this real story was about to begin, and it would start with the sound of rain and the aroma of fresh coffee. It was a rainy afternoon when he ducked into the small coffee shop on the corner, hoping to escape the sudden downpour. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and for a brief second, every head in the room turned to look at the stranger. She stood behind the counter wiping down a tray, her hair slightly messy, her smile effortlessly warm. Unlike the women he was used to, there was no pretension, no performance, just a genuine, unfiltered presence that caught him off guard. He stumbled over his order, asking for something complicated and obscure, like he would back in the city. She laughed softly, teasing him about how their little shop only served two kinds of coffee, hot or iced. The room filled with light chuckles from nearby customers, and for the first time in ages, he found himself smiling. An actual, real smile, not the polished one he wore for cameras. That brief exchange lingered in his mind long after he left. Over the next few days, their paths crossed again, at the farmer's market, near the park, and once when she was helping a stray dog find its way home. Each time, her kindness disarmed him a little more. She spoke with strangers like they were old friends and greeted him with playful sarcasm, never intimidated by his polished suits or expensive watch. This emotional story of connection was unfolding in the smallest, most unexpected moments. One afternoon, she invited him to a community bake sale. The idea of attending such an event seemed almost laughable to him at first, but something in her tone, so casual, so sincere, made it impossible to say no. Standing beside her at that folding table, helping sell homemade cookies and cupcakes, he felt normal. The layers of CEO armor began to crack, letting something real shine through. Conversations with her were refreshingly unpredictable. She jumped from joking about bad coffee to sharing stories about her childhood in the town. There were no strategic questions, no networking, no ulterior motives. Just two people talking, laughing, and getting to know each other. Every sentence felt like a small rebellion against the structured, rehearsed dialogue of his usual life. The simplicity of it all was both terrifying and addictive. As days turned into late afternoons spent together, he found himself looking forward to their next encounter. Sometimes it was just a passing hello, Other times it turned into long conversations on a park bench. She never asked about his work, never Googled him, never treated him like he was anything other than another neighbor passing through town. This touching story was no longer just about a man finding peace. It was about two lives gently intertwining, without either of them realizing how deep it was going. And while neither of them dared to name what was happening, there was a growing tension, something neither of them fully understood, but both felt in every glance, every accidental touch, every lingering goodbye. As the days grew longer and their connection stronger, neither of them could have predicted how much their worlds were about to collide. It started with little things, helping her carry groceries, fixing a broken chair at the cafe, or joining her for an afternoon walk by the lake. None of it was planned. None of it felt like the grand gestures he was used to making in business, deals or public appearances. These were simple, everyday moments, but for him they felt extraordinary. Each small act peeled back another layer of his carefully constructed armor. He found himself laughing more, real laughter, the kind that made his stomach ache and his eyes water. She had a way of making even the most ordinary situations feel like tiny adventures. Whether they were baking cookies that turned out horribly or getting lost on a hiking trail just outside of town, every experience with her felt refreshingly unfiltered. It was as if she'd unknowingly pulled him into a different world, one where titles and balance sheets didn't matter. On one particularly warm afternoon, they sat under an old oak tree, sharing stories about childhood dreams. Hers were filled with simplicity and joy, learning how to garden, someday owning a small bookstore. His were far more complex, shaped by pressure, expectation, and ambition. Hearing her speak, he realized how much he'd missed out on life's simpler joys. This emotional story was slowly becoming a mirror, forcing him to reflect on everything he'd sacrificed along the way. Another day, she taught him how to make homemade bread. The kitchen was a mess, flour dusted across their clothes, and their laughter filled the room like music. For a man used to private chefs and perfectly plated meals, the experience was humbling and unexpectedly fun. It wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. The smell of fresh bread out of the oven felt like a small but powerful victory in reclaiming parts of himself he thought were long gone. He started noticing things he'd always ignored: the color of the sunset, the sound of kids playing in the distance, the way her eyes sparkled when she was excited about something simple. Even trips to the local market became moments he secretly cherished. The people in town began greeting him by name, treating him like one of their own. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a CEO, but as a person. As the weeks passed, their bond deepened. They began sharing little secrets, personal fears, and dreams for the future. He hadn't opened up like this to anyone in years. The vulnerability scared him, but it also felt right. It was a real story unfolding in the most natural way possible, full of small but meaningful moments that stitched their hearts closer together. And just when he started believing that this new life could be his reality, that these moments were building into something lasting, life, as it often does, had other plans. A single phone call was about to remind him of the world he thought he'd left behind and challenge everything he was starting to feel. The phone rang early one morning, just as he was tying his shoes for another lazy walk around town. On the other end was his assistant, frantic, breathless, delivering news he couldn't ignore. A major crisis had erupted back at the company. Stockholders were panicking, board members demanding answers, and competitors circling like vultures. For a moment, he stood there frozen, staring at the small town street outside his window, feeling the old world clawing its way back to him. He packed his bags quickly, barely saying goodbye to anyone. As the town disappeared in the rearview mirror, a heaviness settled in his chest. The city skyline came back into focus like an unwelcome ghost. bringing with it all the noise, pressure, and expectations he had momentarily escaped. Back in the boardroom, surrounded by stressed executives and glowing PowerPoint slides, the difference between his two worlds felt starker than ever. The emotional story of his transformation was now caught in limbo. Days turned into sleepless nights as he tried to juggle financial reports, damage control, and media statements. The familiar rhythm of stress returned with a vengeance. Yet, in the middle of all the chaos, his mind kept drifting back to her smile, her laughter, the way she'd handed him a cup of coffee without expecting anything in return. He'd scroll through old text messages from her, rereading every word like a lifeline. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was a painful reminder of everything he was risking. Her texts became less frequent. At first, she asked how he was holding up, sent little jokes to make him smile. But with every unanswered message, the gap between them grew wider. He wanted to call her, to explain, to promise he'd come back soon. But every time he reached for the phone, another urgent email, another investor call, another crisis pulled him away. The emotional weight of this touching story was growing heavier by the day. At night, when the office lights dimmed and the city slept, he found himself sitting alone, questioning everything. Was this who he wanted to be? A man chained to spreadsheets and quarterly earnings, sacrificing something real for something fleeting. The memory of her standing under that oak tree, laughing with flour on her face, haunted him in the quiet moments. The life he left behind in that small town felt like a dream slipping through his fingers. The worst part was the doubt creeping in. Would she wait for him? Was this just a passing chapter for her too? Could a man like him truly belong in her world of simplicity and kindness? The self-assured CEO, once confident in every decision, now found himself paralyzed by uncertainty. This real story had become more complicated than any business deal he'd ever faced. And just when he thought he couldn't take the emotional tug-of-war any longer, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived, handwritten, smelling faintly of vanilla and ink. Its words would stir something deep within him, something that would force him to make the biggest decision of his life. He sat at his desk, staring at the letter for what it felt like hours. Her handwriting was soft, almost hesitant, but every word carried weight. She hadn't asked him to choose. She hadn't begged for attention. All she wrote was how much she missed their conversations and how she hoped he was finding happiness wherever he was. That single sentence hit harder than any business negotiation or boardroom confrontation he'd ever faced. For the first time in years, he turned off his phone, closed his laptop, cancelled every meeting on his calendar. As he stepped out of the building, the city felt colder, more suffocating than ever. He realized that the success he'd built was nothing more than a golden cage, glittering on the outside, but empty within. Every instinct told him to stay, to fix the company, to be the CEO everyone expected. But for once, he didn't care. He booked a flight without telling anyone. No assistance, no private jet, just a one-way commercial ticket back to that small, sleepy town. As the plane descended, his heart raced. Would she still feel the same? Would she welcome him back, or had too much time passed? Walking through those familiar streets, every step felt like shedding a piece of his old life. The bakery, the park, even the old oak tree, all waiting, unchanged, as if frozen in time. When he reached the coffee shop, she was there, wiping down tables, humming softly to herself. Their eyes met, and for a split second, the noise of the world disappeared. No words were needed. He walked over, standing awkwardly at first, but then she smiled. That same warm, knowing smile. Without thinking, he pulled her into a hug, holding on like he never wanted to let go again. The emotional story they had started was about to take a new, beautiful turn. The following weeks felt like a second chance at life. They walked together through farmers' markets, fixed up an old bike, and spent lazy afternoons under that oak tree, dreaming about futures that didn't involve board meetings or stock prices. Slowly, he began letting go of the habits that had once defined him, checking emails at dawn, making decisions based on fear. With her by his side, he found joy in the little things again. Eventually, he made a decision that shocked everyone back at the company. He resigned, stepped down from everything he had built, let the empire go. His colleagues thought he was insane, but for the first time in years, he felt completely sane. Together, they started planning a small business of their own, something rooted in the community, something meaningful. This wasn't just another touching story of love, it was a total life transformation. And as the sun set on another perfect small-town evening, he stood beside her, looking out over the horizon, knowing he had finally chosen happiness over power. But even as this real story found its place in his heart, little did he know, life still had more surprises waiting just around the corner. And now, tell me honestly, what would you do if you were in his shoes? Would you walk away from million for love? Could you leave behind the life you spent years building just to chase a feeling? Or would you convince yourself that love can wait? That success comes first? I want to know. Have you ever faced a moment like this? A turning point where your heart pulled you one way and the world pushed you the other? Drop your answer in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Let's turn this space into a place where real stories, real emotions, and real choices come alive. And hey, if you love emotional stories like this one, packed with touching moments and unexpected twists, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss the next real story that could change the way you see life and love.